I've worked, like I said, been around the area for the last 20 years, and the area's history has always fascinated me, so that's what I wanted to share with you today. I'm a local real estate expert. I've been operating in and around East London since 1991. I am myself a commercial and residential property owner, so for the landlords out there, I do feel your pain. I'm a long-standing member of the Association of Residential Letting Agents and the National Association of Estate Agents. So I started my research in the area in the 1960s, a glamorous era, but certainly not a glamorous era for the area. Walking around Canary Wharf today, it is almost impossible to comprehend the massive changes that have taken place. Because as recently as the late 1960s, 8,000 people were still employed in the ship repairing business, and some 50,000 people called the docks their workplace. However, the 1970s saw a massive fall in these numbers, following the commercial decline of the London's upriver docks. The main contributing factor towards this decline was decasualisation, and this resulted in less reliance on older working practices and the greater use of pallets and containers. These one-size-fits-all methods of transportation greatly reduced the need for many of the specialised skills of the dock workers. And in short, the Isle of Dogs were dying. Warehouses were left empty, and there were vast areas of derelict land. Some imaginative planning proposals were put forward, but given the unenviable reputation enjoyed by the down-at-heel Isle of Dogs, it is not surprising that very little development took place in the 1970s. To many at the time, E1 and E14 were simply no-go areas. Nonetheless, St Catherine's Dock up in Wapping E1 began to take shape, and most of the water areas of the London and Surrey commercial docks started to fill in. The first real warehouse to be converted into housing was Oliver's Wharf, pictured behind me. Located in Wapping High Street and dating from around 1869, this wonderfully ornate Gothic-style building was actually a former Victorian tea house. The young architects who chose this project, I think, could truly be regarded as pioneers of the Docklands regeneration. They took their cue from similar inner-city projects in New York's Soho area and closer to home from some artists who had started to colonise the abandoned Docklands warehouses. One wonders what their reaction would be at the time had someone said one day these apartments would be among the most sought after in London, and Oliver's Wharf today remains a very sought after location. Now, I couldn't actually get any figures for what this building cost in 1973, but having looked at similar properties in East London commercially, we'd hazard a guess at something around about probably £250,000. I would hazard a guess that's what the building cost. There is a property available today that we can buy. It's just over 2,300 square feet. Anybody hazard a guess at what this apartment would be valued at now? Well, I may have it as a better deal for you, sir, actually, if you're interested afterwards. It's just 1.79. One believer, however, in the area was a chap called Harold Shand. Has anybody seen a film called The Long Good Friday? Yeah, one. Okay, it's essential viewing for anybody that's remotely interested in this area at all. Harold Shand was played by Bob Hoskins, and he was the main protagonist in the film The Long Good Friday. Harold attempted to gain financial support from American investors to develop the London Docklands as, amongst other ideas, a future Olympic host venue. Bearing in mind this film was made in the 1970s, that really truly is remarkable forward thinking. And it's a great example of art mimicking reality, or perhaps that should be the other way around. As I said, the film is really compelling viewing for anybody that has an interest in this area, because it's really interesting to see how the area has changed, but also what areas you can spot now and how they've changed. So I just want to show you a short clip. Slightly morally corrupt policeman on the right-hand side said, "Look at this place with such contempt," because that's how people viewed the area back in the 70s and 80s. It was an arduous prospect, full of the danger of over-promising and under-delivering. And I'm not talking about the challenge that I faced of describing the most significant 10-year period in the Docklands history to you today, but the enormous task faced by the London Docklands Development Corporation in the 80s. Founded in 1981, the LDDC's mission initially was to transform the Isle of Dogs and Royal Docks areas. Not just a lily-livered government quango, the LDDC had a massive mandate and the authority to match. Just one example of this is that even though the Isle of Dogs was designated an enterprise zone in 1981, and most development was free of planning, LDDC approval was still required. Reg Ward, the then chief executive of the LDDC, gives an excellent insight into the enormity of the Docklands regeneration project. He said, in 1981, people perceived Docklands as a total no-go area in housing terms. More than 90% of its stock was public sector, less than 5% owner-occupied, and only 5 houses had been built for private occupation in the previous 5 or 6 years. The last statistic in his quote is almost unbelievable as we sit here in 2016 and think about the thousands of new apartments that have been built in the last 12 months alone. Remember, he said 5 houses had been built for private occupation in the previous 5 or 6 years. Ward and his colleagues were instrumental in not only convincing 4 national homeowners to commit to building, but also came up with the idea for the DLR, which was eventually green-lighted by the government in July 1982. Now, when I first started in the area, DLR never ran on weekends. We had a monorail service which ran 5 days a week. So you can imagine when being confronted with people who were moving from more traditional parts of London, like Chelsea or Kensington, to be faced with this toy train that only ran 5 days a week was an enormous selling challenge. As her regal predecessor is said to have used the area as a large kennel hundreds of years ago, it was perhaps fitting that the Queen should complete the royal opening of the Docklands Light Railway on July 30th, 1987. Thanks to Reg at the LDDC, 1987 was a golden year for transportation in the Docklands area. Not content with having installed this wondrous light railway, the LDDC breathed new life into the Royal Docks by overseeing the construction of the City Airport, which opened in October the same year. Docklands was now no longer the back end of nowhere, only served by minicab drivers, and brave ones at that. Against the backdrop of Thatcher's capitalist Britain, the blank canvas and opportunities offered by the Docklands proved too much of a temptation for large international developers. They recognised the prime locations and cost benefits of the Docklands' vast open areas and accepted the risks, happy to take a long-term view. With a backbone of innovative and modern transportation links, commercial and residential development took off at a simply rapid pace. Like a leviathan rising from the depths, one single deal crystallised the Docklands' transformation. On 17th of July 1987, Olympia, York, Canary Wharf Investments and the LDDC signed the Master Building Agreement for a 12.2 million square feet, £3 billion international financial centre. This agreement marked the birth of Canary Wharf in its current form. The onset of the 90s found the Docklands riding the wave of national optimism. One Canada Square behind me had just been topped out and promptly became both the UK's tallest building and a symbol of the area's burgeoning regeneration. Canary Wharf owners, Olympia and York, had agreed to pay half the cost of the proposed Jubilee Line extension, and the LDDC, over halfway through its tenure, was already preparing an exit strategy. Having overseen the zero to hero status of the former docks, the London Docklands Development Corporation had also contributed more than £120 to local community infrastructure. The pump priming LDDC completed a tough mandate in a relatively short period of time. By 1991, Cyclops Wharf, Cumberland Mills and London Yard, all residential developments, to name just a few, had sprung up on the Isle of Dogs and were mostly occupied. Cascades was perhaps the most famous site of the time, having been publicly criticised by Prince Charles. It even featured in his 1989 book, A Vision of Britain. However, 2 very large spanners were about to get stuck in the well-oiled machinery that was the Docklands regeneration: interest rates and unemployment levels. At the tail end of the 80s, interest rates looked steady at 7.5%, and this was an all-time low at the time. Imagine that, where we think that 7.5% would be a low interest rate, where we're currently sitting at 0.25%. The ensuing high levels of consumer confidence sparked a massive housing boom, and more than 2 million flats and houses were sold nationwide. These early developments in the Docklands proved a magnetic draw for adventurous owner-occupiers and a new breed, speculative off-plan investors. There seems to be a natural synergy between the area's commercial history and the new money, self-made, greed is good, Thatcher's Britain. Massive economic growth occurred over a very short period of time, fueled in part by these sensible interest rates. When they doubled in just over a space of a year, many people found that their recently acquired mortgages became simply unmanageable. It was an event of catastrophic proportions. coupled with all-time high levels of employment and now sky-high interest rates, led to many people simply handing back the keys to their lenders and walking away from their properties. Property values plummeted, and once again a white elephant stigma had returned to the Docklands. The Times reported that some 80,000 repossessed homes would be on the market during '91. Many ambitious developments lay unfinished. Bowles Wharf, for example, where my office is, was only around 50% built when the original developer went bankrupt. A further blow to struggling commercial developers occurred in April '92 when the Isle of Dogs lost its enterprise zone status. This status meant that developers previously only had to pay 50% of the uniform business rate, what we know now as business tax. This sent massive shockwaves through the Docklands, and by early May '92, Olympia York had simply run out of money. Later that month, that company and 32 of its subsidiaries filed for bankruptcy protection in Canada and the USA, because it was still trying to obtain funds to finish Canary Wharf. But what particularly alarmed their bankers was that much of the money required was simply to pay interest on existing loans. In boxing terms, the Docklands had emerged as an unknown, risen to stardom very quickly, but was now on the ropes in the first round of its title defence fight. It wasn't until December '95 that an international consortium, backed by the former owners of Olympia York and the other investors, bought the Canary Wharf scheme back. The new company was called Canary Wharf Limited, now known as the Canary Wharf Group. Recovery during the late '90s was bolstered by the fact that there was a real increase in demand for large office space. In addition, the opening of the Jubilee line on the 17th of December 1999, opened just in time for the Millennium celebrations, as was the target, was a massive momentous occasion. Not only did it provide this area with a much needed transportation option to the Docklands Light Railway that was already running at near capacity, but it also meant that many people who had not considered the area previously now would. Since that day, 1999, the Canary Wharf complex has grown massively. And behind me, I'm going to show just a selection of the buildings that have gone up since 1999. This is just a selection of residential apartment blocks that are being completed between now and circa 2018. In summary, I believe the Docklands skyline has never looked busier and the area's future has never looked brighter. I know that we have, some people have concerns over Brexit, but having spoken to many of our Chinese and Hong Kong investors, the reasons why investment carries on in the UK, the reasons behind that hasn't changed. You know, we still have a very stable democratic society. We have an excellent cultural and educational reputation, and we have safe land titles, none of which is affected by the fact of whether or not we're in or out of Europe. I do write a newsletter, which I hope you have a copy of in the bags that you picked up from the front. It's full of useful information about the local area. It covers what's happening, what I think is going to happen, and what changes are happening in the area. So if you visit docklandsnewsletter.com, you can just simply put in your email details and you'll get a free copy each month. It is completely free. I also write a blog. I list on there various buy-to-let opportunities that aren't necessarily with my own company. So if I see a good deal with another agent, be it anybody, I'll put it on my blog and say, look at this, guys, this is a really good opportunity for you to buy. Here's the rental yield. Thank you very much for listening. Like I said, I will be around later. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.